Okay, Scott Carr, founder of the Empowered Parents Summit and the Empowered Parent Summit series, here with you again from sunny Vancouver, hanging out and getting inspired and motivated to become a stronger parent, connecting with some great ideas from our presenters. Just a recap for you at this point is in this series, it's been amazing to have had Carrie Isham join us and talk about sexual health and key tips for summer safety for our children. We also had Todd Ritchie share his ideas around engaging authentically with our children over the summer and using the summer as an opportunity to really be able to spend quality time and lower our stress levels. And we also, yesterday, had Alistair Moose come on board and talk from Moose Anger Management and talk about why it is that we can get stressed out and angry in the summer and what those triggers tend to be. And those three individuals were just brilliant. And so I encourage everyone to make a purchase of a VIP seat, which would allow you to be able to have all those recordings sent to you directly so you can listen from them to them again. We just had a roundtable between 11 and 11:45 where we had Bob Singa and Fessel Kadek and Tara Kennedy Klein talking about resilience and building resilience in youth today and the impediments around that. And the way that we often as parents feel like we're being judged if we allow our kids to fall or if we experience failure, and if we allow them the space to pick themselves back up. I mean, this is one of the major challenges that we have as parents today, is knowing when to let go and when to get out of the way and to stop advocating for our children in those moments and let them discover real courage and build resiliency, because we know at the end of the day that's so key. If they can have as many degrees as they want, but unless they are moving forward courageously, confidently, and with resilience, which we only get from getting through things. And as Fessel reminded us, coming back like the rubber band that's stretched out and coming back to our true selves and being strong with that's resiliency. And I believe that 30, 40 years ago, our parents didn't take it personally if we failed, if we didn't make a team or weren't invited to a birthday party. It was part of life, it was part of the cycle. And they knew somehow that we'd figure that out and that we were going to be okay. And today we seem to take it personally as a parent if our daughter, our son doesn't make a team or experiences a setback. Or, it's not to say that we don't have legitimate issues out there. We have bullying. We have an increased sexual culture today, both for boys and for girls. And we have some strange stuff happening. We see it in the media all the time. But in order to get resilient and develop that and foster that with our own children, we know that we need to first, as a parent, be resilient. Now, I'm going to share with you my presentation here today, and I'm looking to have a screen sharing opportunity. And I just want to work through that and see if I can get that going with my presentation. And we'll see where we're at with getting my screen share up and running so I can talk about mindsets and parenting. I think this is so vital today that we have that discussion. And just give me a moment to see what I can do about that. Well, you know what? I'm having a bit of a glitch with my screen, so I'm just going to go ahead and, while I can't show you a screen here today, I want to make sure that you know that why I'm here with you. And I'm going to mention that the reason I'm really here. I'll just back up a little bit. I found it in the Empowered Parents Network because I made the choice to raise my three daughters solo. And I found that there really wasn't tremendous resources for parents that were going through some difficult times. They're out there, but I'm not so sure that they're in the positive space or looking at solo parenthood as something that can really be the best possible outcome in your life. And so one of the reasons I've started this is to make sure that parents are supported, whether they're together with a spouse or not, or a partner, whether they're going through tough times, that parent, and just to help people understand that parenting is not only the truest reflection of ourselves, of who we are, but also one of the greatest opportunities that you could ever have in your life. And so I want to spend some time talking about strategies to support an empowered and intentional and stress-free parenting state. I think that's important. I want to share my own story around mindset and the keys to becoming, in my mind, an empowered parent. And I also want to invite you to join my Ultimate Parenting Blueprint program. Now, you can't see my screen, but I would like to mention to you that I really view parenting as a choice to inspire and connect with our children. I like to get out into nature with my kids. I've got 3 daughters, 12, 8, and 6, and we love the mountains. We love exploring. And I think that I know that when I allow my truest interests in nature and in athletics and in stretching the limits of who I am and what I think I can do, when I do that, I am able to inspire my own children to do the same and also connect with them at a very deep level. I want to mention to you that my parenting philosophy really goes like this. I believe that the greatest gift that we can provide our children with are the mindsets to believe that their future really has no limits. Now, that's a tall order, but unless we are helping our children pull back the limiting beliefs, which are those false stories which they tend to believe, that's there in their unconscious minds, unless we're doing that, I think that we're selling ourselves short as parents, and we're not maximizing the true leverage that we have in this role. I also believe that parenting and families have really changed. Here we are 15 years into the 21st century, and I have my daughters helping me with video blogging, with editing, with making sure that the angles are correct on the camera. There's aspects of my business that I involve them in, and I want to have that deep connection with them. You know, we co-create dinners together. We look to create our days together or on our own, and we have those types of conversations. And I think that while we can have a blurring today in parenting between fighting for our own space and our own privacy and the things that we need, and it gets all mixed together with our children, doesn't it? It's hard to set the boundaries. But when we do that and we're courageous in that, we're able to really impact our children dramatically, both by showing them the importance of saying no, having focused time on one thing, not depending on screens. Whereas when I grew up, I think that while it was positive to have to fend for ourselves and not have parents fretting over what we were doing day to day, hour to hour, I think that, you know, we need to acknowledge that parenting has changed and that in some respects, I don't know that we understand the implications of our own behaviors and our own attitudes and how they affect our kids. I would also mention that I think that family life is portrayed when we grew up in, say, the 70s or the 80s much differently than today. I have a clip on my screen which I like to play now and again of the Brady Bunch, of a great show from the 1970s and early 80s of one of the Bradys ran away and she came back very regretful, remorseful about that experience, and yet she was able to come back and admit her faults and her mistakes, and that she was embraced by her 5 brothers and sisters, and her father had the final word and welcomed her back, and her grandparents were there. So this family of 7 or 8 people all there in that melancholy moment, and it really portrayed how family life was. Big families living out in the suburbs with grandparents there to help out with everything, and roles were really clear. And I think that the next clip that I like to show is that of a bank advertisement around a family that is scurrying around in the morning, both working, both having to get their kids to school, and cats going, running around, and pets, I should say, and lunch is having to be made, and breakfast is, here and there, everywhere. Both mom and dad are involved, and of course the mom says, "Oh, and by the way, I have a dentist appointment, and you're going to pick up the kids." And, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, I'm pregnant." And there's a look of horror, in the parents' face, and no doubt, because the pressures of parents today are mounting. It's really difficult today. I think we can argue that it's harder than it ever has been to transfer mindsets and confidence and a passion and a self-belief into our children. And I think that's a real contrast in just 35 or 40 years from how it used to be. I really believe that the three main challenges as to why parents continue to face challenges today is that there really is no manual. There's no playbook that says, listen, this is how you do it. Follow step one and you'll get here, and follow step two and you'll get there. I mean, in ABCs of parenting, it's really difficult. And I think that we're, that's one reason why we struggle. We also, number two, tend to blame society or schools or screens, but rarely ourselves. Parents are not able often enough to look in the mirror and really understand that it's their own anxiety or their own fears or their own anger that are really impacting their children. And at the end of the day, our kids are playing it that back to us, aren't they? And number three, the times truly have changed. We have a very unique society in North America now where we have a lot of great developments for women, of course, as we're moving towards a more egalitarian society. But we know we still have men at the top in big corporate jobs and big executive jobs, let's call them. And we have women often in roles of real authority and executive roles, but they tend still to be in the middle, management type jobs, the middle of the spectrum, let's say, whereas men are all clustered in both places at the top and then increasingly at the bottom. Here in Canada, we're graduating 200,000 less males per year from post-secondary school than we are females. The Globe and Mail reported that in 2012 in a five-part series called Failing Boys. We have a highly sexualized culture now where really the brains of our children are being changed through video games and their experiences in virtual worlds. I mean, this is nothing like we had if we grew up in the 1970s or 80s or even 90s. So times have changed and we're struggling as parents, there's no doubt about it. Now, my own story really is twofold, and it has two parts and it has really 3 or 4 layers to it. And I want to talk briefly about my experience growing up and understanding how the attitudes and the environment around me impacted me. And part 2 is the parenting challenges that I face today and the opportunities I face as a parent raising my 3 children solo. And the 3 layers that I would like to weave into this story is one is compassion, and that is from my own parents who really didn't have this type of information on neuroscience and behavioral analysis when they were raising their own children. And so in fact, they've been so supportive of me in my life through all the ups and downs that I really dedicate everything that I do at the Empowered Parents Network to them. Second layer is on awareness, and I know that unless I work really hard to shift to become super aware and conscious of my own behavior as a parent and as a person, that I would raise my children with the same limiting beliefs and attitudes that I had. And so I work hard to be aware and to be transparent with my children in that process. And also the third layer is around belief and the importance of understanding that we will rise in our lives as parents, as adults, and certainly as children, to the degree that we fully believe in ourselves as people. And belief truly does trump talent. And unless we can begin to choose ahead of time where it is that we're going and make that experience more real, or already real in our minds, even though it's in the future, then we're going to be caught living in the past. And that's how it goes in a lot of situations. I do want to congratulate everyone here who has shown up today. I really appreciate that. It's great to have you part of this conversation. And so thanks for making the time. That's really vital that you do that on behalf of yourself and your children. We're busy, and the fact that you've made some time to click and listen, I really appreciate it. I'm also really grateful for the community that we're developing at the Empowered Parents Network and for the participation in our summits. This is number 2.0, and and our participation in these and the general webinars that we run are really growing. But my experience is that parents are actually, in some respects, in denial around really what's happened in our own lives growing up and how that's impacted us today as people. We become desensitized to it, don't we? And sometimes we lose perspective on really why we're here and what's happened and who it is that we are in all of this. We love our parents automatically, really, as we should. We can't really expect a whole lot else, as a lot of gurus would suggest. But I found that we often struggle as people when we lose the ability to be objective towards our parents. Often we're too harsh when we shouldn't be, or sometimes we're too forgiving when we really should be taking a closer look. And the fact is that our interactions with our parents and the environment that they created for us growing up really forms the basis of our unconscious mind. And Bruce Lipton, in The Biology of Belief, would suggest that as much as 95% of how we think by default is shaped in those first 7 or 8 years of when our brain waves are changing, when we're experiencing everything and reliant so much upon how our parents think and how they act and their own attitudes. And certainly, while our parents did the best they could with the information and the blueprints that they had for, they got those from their own parents. And the fact is, today, if we're going to continue to just use those blueprints as parents, it's not going to work because the times have really changed. And I'm going to cover how these times have changed a bit more specifically. But I really want to spend a little bit of time now on my story and connecting to who I am as a father and as a person, and what it was like for me growing up. And like I say, we have to be thankful that our parents put us here, gave us this opportunity to exist, and to expect anything more really is futile. But again, I think there's plenty of things that we can shift as parents that will support our children's education, their mindsets, and how they relate to themselves in the world, that we can do simply day to day as long as we become aware and strategic about it. Now, the positives with my father are many. I mean, my father grew up old school in the sense that, he was a provider, had an excellent job, moved around a little bit, but was always there, worked 42 years for the same company, sacrificed a lot for his family, did things for me like built a hockey rink outside our house in Montreal growing up so I can learn how to skate. He was a fan of mine. He drove me to all the practices, and he was always there for me. I'm very thankful and grateful for the attention of the stability that he provided, and for all the time as well that he invested in my interest in developing me. And my mother was a traditional stay-at-home mom. She wanted to be a librarian until I came around, and I changed that. I was born 10 years after the third. But my mother sacrificed for the family, and she was that home provider in a lot of cases because my father traveled around a lot for business. She was on her own raising her children and did extremely well in sacrificing and providing for them day to day. But any way you slice it, my parents never had really the tools to learn how to become, or how it was that to be the best parents that they could be, involved becoming the best people that they could possibly be. That if they improved as people, that they would invariably improve as a parent. Because when we struggle as parents, we don't struggle as a parent, we struggle as a person in that role. So I've dedicated this expert practice to my parents, who were always there for me and did absolutely the best they could with all the information that they had and the societal expectations that they had at the time. My parents duplicated really the way that they were raised in a lot of cases, and in some ways they shifted some of their attitudes to make sure that their own children had a better, easier time. Lower expectations perhaps, or more realistic expectations, and not as much pushing as they received growing up. But either way, the bottom line is that they did the best that they absolutely could at the time. But the reality of it is that if I duplicated today the mindsets that and attitudes towards parenting that my parents used, they raised 3 of their children in the 1950s and 60s, and times have changed. I mean, my goodness, I'm raising kids 50 years onward from them. And so if my parents got their mindsets from their parents, who grew up in the 1910s and 20s, and they duplicated that in the 1950s and 60s, if I was going to duplicate those same attitudes and not challenge some of those attitudes, I'd be basically parenting as if it was 100 years ago, right? And we know things have changed. What we know about the brain, what we know about self-talk and auto-suggestion, what we know about needing to step forward and declare what it is that we really want, living with passion and purpose. All that's changed. That information wasn't there in the 1950s and 60s. So, I think that one of the things that I've definitely worked on shifting in part of my story is making sure that I'm parenting and I'm conscious of raising my children on what is rather than what isn't. And I believe that that was one of the challenges in my family, was around expectations and focusing on what wasn't happening rather than what was. Because if we focus on what's missing, what's wrong, or just appearance, or what other people, if we rely on what other people think, that doesn't do anything for us or our own children or in our own household. And also, well, I'm an educator. I have several degrees and a master's degree as well. I think that when we just focus on education as validating ourselves, that we're missing out on some of the key elements around belief and mindset that really our children need to learn about. So I think there was always this expectation in my family, as part of my story, that, you know, to be really validated in society, you had to go to school, you had to get a degree. It really didn't so much matter about your prospects, but you had to complete that rite of passage. And while that's still very important today, we know that, I think that we know enough that times have changed as well. There's a lot of other things that we can do to bolster our prospects for the future as well, beyond college or university. I think that one of the challenges that my father had as a parent, and it's something that I really have tried to overcome and not repeat, is that he was on the road a lot. The expectation of a father in the 1950s or 60s was a guy that would, you know, have a cigarette or a pipe in the other room, and you know, that was how it was. You know, your father wasn't there to necessarily confide in or connect with at a deep level, and because he was on the airplanes and in hotels and providing for his family, that there was disconnection, and that was probably normal. I think a lot of you that are listening to this would suggest that, yeah, that's the way it was for my father as well. But I'm trying to break that and make the conscious choice of understanding that, you know, parenting, period, involves a deep connection with our children, and also knowing where to draw the line as well. You know, that might be familiar with you, but, you know, the reality of it is you know, I think there was deep disconnections at points in time in our family, and probably in yours as well. And a couple other things that I wanted to mention too is that, you know, my mother, with all the positives that I mentioned around providing for the family and being there and being the listener and being the home care provider in so many ways and driving us here and there, I think that there was always a sense that, you know, what other people thought about her was more important than what she thought, and that maybe she didn't trust all the aspects of her own parenting intuition. I think that it's fair to say that people of a different generation listened to their doctor much more than they would listen to themselves, and there was reasons why people were conditioned that way. But when we're talking about parenting decisions, we know instinctively what's right or wrong, and I think the more that we can come to grips with that and be strong in those moments and ensure that our intuition is shining through, and that it's for the right reasons, and we're not afraid to say no, and that we draw consistent, real boundaries with our children, especially with the technology that is in place today and all the distractions and the shift in authority that we have from, you know, youth becoming all powerful and all knowing, and parents becoming, in some ways, if you look at television shows or movies, you know, parents viewed as useless or losers. I mean, that theme is throughout modern entertainment today. I think that we need to be able to trust. I learned from my mother that it's vital that we know that we trust ourselves in terms of what's right, and that doctors can advise us, but really we need to make the call at the end of the day. So, and finally, in terms of raising my own children and making that choice, as I was going through a separation and a difficult time in my life, my children I was always very close with, and maybe it was just realizing that I needed to have that role as a father in the family, but they really became my inspiration, and that I had a deep connection with them from the get-go. And it's because of my deep connection that when things did fall apart for me, that I made that conscious effort to raise them solo and created a life and an expert practice around that, and been looking to inspire and empower youth and parents ever since. And you know, it's because what I experienced, as I mentioned and observed in my own family. I'm not talking about abuse and all the tough things that people have gone through. I'm just talking about, you know, certain ways that families were brushing things under the carpet, maybe not really dealing with real emotions and anger. A lot of the stuff that we know we have to do as parents today to be real for our children, those things add up, you know, at the end of the day. And I wanted to make sure that I was real with my children, to know why things were the way they were and how it is that we were going to move forward. Now, so basically a lot of this comes in the mindset education that I work through with people comes around from my experience, from my research, and I can tell you a bit more about that now. But I think first and foremost, I wanted to make sure that I took responsibility for my children. Even though things didn't work out in my relationship, it didn't mean I had to step away from the primal responsibility of raising children. And I think that we're very fortunate to live in a society today where it's looked upon positively when males do that, although it's still interesting. I still, people are totally comfortable with that. But that's another story for another day. And I think that another takeaway that I had from my time as an educator and as a coach, and what really stuck with me, is that it was interesting for me that during times when I had parent-teacher interviews with our students, it was the high-performing children whose parents showed up on time and asked all the questions and were respectful and took responsibility. The parents of children who didn't really need to be there because things by default were pretty happening out of habit at home, were always there. And we're always grateful for the time that we put in as educators. And it was interesting that the kids that were struggling and that were more aloof, that were less accountable, less responsible, less high performing, it was their parents who wouldn't often show up to the parent-teacher interviews. Maybe it was because of the broken relationship, maybe because it just wasn't a priority. But that was a deep realization for me that there's things that the most primal effect that we can have on our children is what we're doing on a home front for them as parents. And the real reason, and I'll finish with this, with my story section, is one of the real reasons that I knew I had to get this message out was that even though I was making a transition in my life and that we didn't really have very much as I was going through some difficult times, we didn't have much materially. My daughters and I had so much emotionally and such a deep connection with one another that it didn't matter that we just, we could be together playing a board game, riding a bike, connecting, and that material things didn't matter at that point in time. They're getting older, so it matters a bit more now to them, but still there's that element of being together is more important. I mean, my daughter, when we get too busy and we don't focus that time, I think with my eldest daughter at 12, she really does feel that lack of connection sometimes, and I know that that's a symptom for her when we need to sit down and really reconnect about the most basic things. So I encourage you as a parent that no matter what car is sitting in your driveway, or no matter what timeshare you've booked, or whatever it might be materially that you desire, nothing will replace the connection that you have with your own children. Nothing. That is priceless, and that's something I encourage you to connect with daily if possible. Okay, great. Now, moving forward, I want to just mention briefly 4 challenges that youth face today. One stems from the marshmallow tests, which was a study done many years ago around the ability of 4-year-olds to delay gratification for the promise of a second marshmallow. And they followed those children that they studied about 35 years later, and the researcher discovered that the children that were able to delay the gratification for 5 minutes and not take the second marshmallow, in every case, the ones that delayed gratification had higher incomes, better relationships, had higher standings in their community, were healthier in every sense of the way, without exception. So when we live in a society that rewards instant gratification and we begin to depend on instant gratification, we're shifting one of the age-old success principles in our children, and that is the ability to just put off the gratification now for bigger gratification later. Another challenge that we face today, parents and youth, is continual partial distraction. And that means have you ever gone to your phone to check a calendar appointment, and next thing you know, you're into some texts and into some emails and you forgot why you went to your device in the first place? The reality of it is that we are continually partially distracted. We are not focused in one moment, rarely at all. And the people that really do succeed, and the ones that have large impact and influence in the world, are able to do that. They're able to shut out the distractions and focus with the one matter at hand. We've also entered the entertainment age. So if we're talking about the 70s and 80s, when we grew up, now we live, which was a results-based society, more or less. We now live in an entertainment society. That's the reality. As teachers, coaches, we need to be able to engage and entertain our children, to hold their attention. And it's sort of the expectation. We go to the gym and there's 16 screens there, and I've got people working out in the morning that are paying more attention to the highlights from last night, something in the past, rather than their present commitment to further their health or their fitness. And also we have health and wellness challenges today, unlike at any other time. The World Health Organization is suggesting that this cohort of youth will be the first in the developed world to live less long than their parents, because of a sedentary lifestyle, because of poor eating habits and nutritional understanding, that our children are projected in many cases to live less long than we will. So we have some real challenges there as well, despite all the conveniences that we have in our society today. And some modern parenting trends to cover some of those things up are things like helicopter parenting, where we're always attached to our children well into their 20s and advocating for them much more so than really we should. And it's hard not to helicopter parent, because that's what parents do. It's a style, it's a habit. But the reality of it is we're ending up protecting our kids from circumstances that they need to probably face up to, and become resilient as they work their way through that. We also, in some respects in our society, have an aversion towards failure, and we want to protect our children from failure in a lot of situations. We think failure is bad, as opposed to a vehicle to be able to learn from. We all failed growing up. We had all aspects of getting cut from teams and losing friends and real heartache and pain in our lives, and we found a way to get through that and emerge stronger as a result. And I think we have less opportunities for our kids to do that today. We also have a dependence now on prescription drugs, not just Ritalin for ADHD, but certainly antidepressants for younger females as well. It's routine now for kids to be medicated, and we're doing that much more than we were in the 70s and 80s. And we have to ask ourselves at the end of the day, when our kids are involved in screens and their devices and their virtual worlds, are they occupied or engaged when they're doing so? Now, we all like and should take breaks. We know that novelty is important, whether we like movie or sports highlights or the news or what have you, different things that we need to be able to do. It's okay to be occupied. But I always ask myself, as much as I can when my daughters are on their iPads, are they at all engaged? Can they be engaged in learning through that experience? And I think that with the right apps and with the right games, they can be as well. And that's an important question to ask ourselves as parents. Now, I want to talk briefly about one strategy about lowering stress, and I want to encourage everyone that's listening today as a parent to understand that we need to do three things to reduce our stress as parents. One is to avoid buying in to parenting as being stressful. It is going to be. We signed up for this, and we're taking responsibility in doing this. But parenting does not need to be stressful, and we don't need to associate with those parents that are stressed about it. I don't mean being disconnected and thinking everything's going to be okay, but we don't need to, we don't need to do that. We don't need to think like that and operate from a stress perspective as a parent. We, as a parent, need to achieve life balance to be able to reduce stress. I happen to wake up at 5 o'clock every morning. It's a choice that I've made so that I can get outside, clear my thoughts, set my intentions for the day, and get exercise between 6 and 7. That's what I do, whether it's swim or on the elliptical, lifting some weights. I make sure that I reduce stress by firing into some endorphins and making sure that I'm moving forward physically and mentally, emotionally into my day. So when the things that come up, I'm more prepared to deal with them rationally, without emotion, and looking at them as an event instead. And also to understand aspects of our lives that we can actually impact. And what I mean by that is I want you to think about for a moment, when you have thoughts, positive or negatively, are you doing so with situations that you could actually control? So A, are you thinking negatively by default about the world and circumstances, or are you thinking more positively about things? I don't mean being naive or Pollyanna. I just mean, do you tend to put a positive spin on things, or are you always trying to find the negative one of the things that I grew up with was an overtone of negativity, and around situations that my parents and family couldn't possibly control if they wanted to. So the high performers, the parents that are able to reduce stress and model for their children high performance behavior and attitudes, are more routinely able to think more positively around circumstances that they can actually leverage and control. So when they're in a line, they're not worried about the grocery line or maybe the traffic. When they're stuck in those circumstances, they're thinking into the future about, whatever it might be, a trip that they're working towards, or how they can make their life better, or they're solving problems using those idle times constructively, and they're doing that out of habit. And folks that spend time negatively, feeling like a victim, that I don't deserve this, and I really, things should be so much better. We spend time there. We're just complaining, and we're using our time negatively. We're triggering, when we have negative thoughts, we trigger negative feelings. That's the reality. That's the neurochemistry of it. And so we need to move towards, as much as we can, and it's hard, we have to fight this, thinking positively around situations that we can control and learning to let go of the other situations. All right, now I think that the other aspect I'd like to talk about briefly, and we've got about 5 or 7 minutes just to wrap up, is that we also, high-performing parents tend to inspire their children's best performances, because the reality of it is our children are simply repeating. We don't always know this. We don't always have the perspective or the mirror up for this, but really, they're just repeating what it is that we do. They're just playing it back to us, and we can't see it sometimes because we're triggered by those behaviors, and they often set us off emotionally because we can't quite connect it, or we do connect it and we're feeling remorseful that we've created that. And so when we don't walk our talk, our children notice. That's the reality. And when we rely on words or authority to parent, we tend to bring in emotions and we complicate matters. And what I'd encourage you to do as a parent is to, yes, we need to be able to communicate and parent by telling, but it's a lot easier to parent by telling when we can, in fact, first depend on parenting, what I call parenting by doing, or a role model persona over an authority persona. So if we want, for example, our children to have a more tidy room, have we asked ourselves if our room is more tidy, or if it's around the dishes and picking up the kitchen and helping out? Are we first helping them out and modeling for them inclusive behavior and responsible behavior? I tell my children this a couple times a week, that they can't possibly expect anything to come to themselves that they haven't put out there in the universe in the first place. They absolutely need to put out the right kind of karma and the right sort of intentions for good things to come to them. And if they don't do that, they can't expect things are just going to come to them. That's a fundamental conversation that we need to have with ourselves and with our children. So I encourage everyone listening to really work as hard as they can on developing a role model persona rather than an authority persona, where we end up complicating things by words and getting into it. We want to show them by how we live. And also another deeply complicated matter that we have today in a society that's averse to failure is the idea of how failure shapes us, and embracing the idea of failing forward as parents to be able to model for our children resilience, or the type of mindset it's going to take to create a limitless future for ourselves. We all know that if we want to improve, we must find a way to get out of our comfort zone. We have to do that. And we need to learn how to get comfortable with discomfort at varying degrees. And we need to learn how to instill a growth mindset in our children. I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. And we have to understand the impact of our attitudes, our own attitudes towards failure, and how we embrace them, what we think that means for us. Now, what I would like to spend just a moment telling you about is a growth mindset is been pioneered by Dr. Carol Dweck, who's now at Stanford University. And in her research, what she studied was grade 1 or 2 students, and she and her colleagues were able to see how they reacted to failure and whether or not they had the type of auto-suggestion to embrace further challenges to test their intelligence and to test who it is they believe they were in a more challenging environment. So children that are naturally gifted or naturally smart, and they're praised on fixed characteristics like their intelligence or their looks, things that they can't control, that they're sort of born with. Those, when educators and parents reinforce those fixed characteristics, those children, despite being smart or gifted, are not going to stretch themselves into new territories and take new risks and put themselves in a vulnerable state to be able to learn and move forward. And their life trajectories, while they might be great at 12 or 14, they're not necessarily going to continue to improve over their lifetime. Whereas students that maybe not as naturally smart or as gifted, but if they're praised for the ability to work hard and dedicate themselves, that they use discipline or focus as the key ingredients to their success, Dewick discovered that those students had the growth mindset to be able to take on new challenges, allow themselves to become vulnerable, and really achieve greater heights as a result and better results. And so over a lifetime, with a growth mindset, our trajectory is going to go up, maybe even at 45 degrees, because we're taking on new challenges, we're getting confident, we're failing forward, and we're not stopping. You know, we're not mindful of what other people think. It's our internal worlds and our resilience are more important than our external world. I'm not going to get into psychology here too much, but the reality of it is you want to have a growth mindset son or daughter. In order to do so, you must be a growth mindset adult and parent, which means that you're okay, that you're going to fail, and that you're going to move through those experiences and learn from it and model the types of behaviors that you can for your kids. Okay, good. As we move to just wrap up, and I appreciate everyone sticking around for this conversation because I think this is really vital information to be reminded of. I want you to know that at Empowered Parent Network, what we work on with our clients is a life balance mindset, which is, you know, educating parents to reduce stress, to achieve life balance and true perspective. We also work with them to develop a true role model mindset, to learn how to parent as a role model rather than as an authority figure. And we work with our parent clients to develop a growth mindset so that we're able to fail forward, to be able to be comfortable with discomfort and view obstacles as challenges to get past, not as roadblocks to turn away from. And I want to just end here by, before I give you an invitation, I want to end with 4 parenting truths that are there that we don't often talk about and uncover, but it's vital that we make sense of them. And that is that, number 1, parents create all the baseline energy and attitude in our children's lives. When we are stressed or when we have anxiety or we're angry, we shift that energy out directly to our children. And number 2, when we struggle as parents, we're actually struggling as people who are parents. So the same situations that impact our parenting effectiveness impact our leadership effectiveness and our ability to work with others and collaborate. Being a parent is not some other thing. It's woven into who we are as an adult, and we need to fix ourselves as people in order to be the best parents that we can be. And 3, parents tend to parent much like they were parented, which can be a very good thing or not a good thing, depending on your own story and how it was in your household. But unless we're conscious and aware and we have a game plan moving forward, we're just going to repeat the same dialogues and attitudes and behaviors. And 4, we only get one opportunity to get it right. We don't get a pass. We don't get a mulligan on this and get to restart it. We have to get things right. And that's one of the reasons that I've created this expert practice to help parents move forward and make sure that they do that. So the questions become for you, what are the costs to you as a parent to not know these strategies? And what's the cost to your children if they don't develop these mindsets? And really crucially at home, are you modeling the attitudes and mindsets that are going to best complement your child's education and their development as people? All right, so to ensure that you don't have parenting regrets and to ensure that those mindsets are in place and that you know that you leveraged everything that you possibly could when you have that opportunity, that unique one, to be a parent and to be a role model for your children, I do invite you to join my Ultimate Parenting Blueprint program, where you can absolutely learn to develop these mindsets so that your children can duplicate them and carry them forward into their own lives. And secondly, to help you create your own personalized and modern parenting manual. There isn't one. We all need a playbook to get through life, and I have one that I use, and I can help you develop exactly the same to make sure that you don't have regrets and to make sure that your stress levels go down because you know you're doing the right things. It also gives you an opportunity to join other empowered parents who really truly are building a village around ourselves and around our children to make sure that we're able to have a community support moving forward of like-minded parents. And really importantly, you get lifetime access to my weekly group coaching calls around mindset principles. You get 2 one-on-one coaching sessions per month and access to a private Facebook group with support, learnings from committed parents and other experts that I collaborate with in this space, some of who are on this summit with me. So you have my invitation to register for that. I've got a great discount going on for this summit, especially for you. And I would encourage you to act now and go to empoweredparentsnetwork.ca and click on the link, The Ultimate Parenting Blueprint. You'll see that there under programs. Again, the empoweredparentsnetwork.ca, The Ultimate Parenting Blueprint. Go ahead, or short of that, drop me an email and let's take this conversation offline to see how I could best support you lowering your stress levels, becoming a growth mindseted and role model parent, and really understanding how it is that you can move forward and live an epic life as a parent. So I want to thank everyone for listening today. It's been great to share my story with you so that you can learn about my passions and my motivations for creating these summits and this expert practice. And I want to invite you to do the same, to be able to contact me and reach out to me at the empoweredparentsnetwork.ca and to begin a dialogue around, making parenting fantastic, so to make sure that your children develop the mindsets so that you can work yourself out of a job at the end of the day and feel great about doing that. We have a couple more speakers coming up at the summit. We have Matt Sweetwood at 2:30 Pacific, and at 4 o'clock we've got Di Manuel, 2 good friends of mine that are going to be talking about excellent aspects of parenting. Di around nutrition and fitness, and Matt around his story in developing confidence in his children. He raised 5 children on his own. Thank you again for spending some time here today. I honor you for taking that time. It's Scott Carr from the Empowered Parents Network and creator of the Empowered Parents Summit Series, signing off for now, and we'll see you again soon.